All right, so Gaza War Day 406. Yeah, Lebanon War Day 60. Jon Elmer's here. Hey, John.
Hey, Justin.
So, read the news today from Canada. I guess we should start with the Canada front of the war
Yeah,
against the planet. Charlotte Cates's home was raided by a bunch of tactical police. They used flashbang grenades. Charlotte Cates is a Samidoun political prisoner activist. Like we're all activists. Like we know Charlotte Cates. Like you don't need
yeah.
flashbangs. You don't need flashbangs to raid Charlotte Cates's house.
No, and like an armored vehicle.
A simple knock on the door would have been enough. That's crazy stuff. Just completely crazy stuff. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say about
Yeah,
it.
I don't know what to say either. I mean, do you know the details? The details seem sparse. Like
Yeah, they
there's
they apparently they detained her and they released her. It was like a super brief detention. So they did
yeah,
this gigantic, massive raid as if it was like a fortified,
yeah,
mob house or something for
yeah,
like
with a literal armored vehicle.
a little old lady. I mean, she's not old, but like for like a activist,
And for what she said.
for what she said at a public meeting exercising, a solidarity activist, like saying things that you're supposed to, you know, be able to say, supposedly. Um, yeah, unbelievable. So solidarity with Samidoun.
Yeah, solidarity with
It's a
Simon Dune.
political prisoner organization.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very public one. There's no secret Sami
Yeah,
Dune
yeah, that's right.
documents.
That's right. There's no secret Semi-Doom documents that you're gonna find like leaked from Netanyahu's office or,
Yeah.
or Benny Gantz's laptop or whatever, or Gadi Eisenkot's phone. Yeah, I mean, political prisoners, the Mary Mac 4 in the States are in jail. They started their 60-day sentence too for protesting at Elbit Systems. So Palestine Action trying to stop the war machine like through direct actions, and there's a whole bunch of political prisoners in the US and the UK now because of those actions, right? So
Yeah.
someone said
In the middle of a genocide, like just the
yeah,
scale and
yeah,
and the disproportionate nature and the just like the pure underpinning of just madness
yeah,
that you, if you're not a gleeful supporter of
yeah,
this genocide, then you're a literal legal threat.
and you're gonna get in legal trouble. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
gonna get, yeah,
Which even if you beat the charges, they harass you with
yeah,
them. They take up your life, they take up your time and your energy, and has a chilling effect on, I'm sure, I mean, it's sure it has an inspirational effect on some generation of cadre. I'm sure that there's going to be a generation that says at some point that they grew up watching people get arrested for making speeches on the stairs of the
yeah,
public library. But, it's intended to have a chilling effect.
yeah.
I haven't seen it. Any of the examples so far, we haven't seen it have a chilling effect. People just got right back to work.
Imagine if they hadn't done these chilling things. Imagine where we'd be. But yeah, so I wanted to say those things from closer to home since we have to talk about these. These are people, like in the same position as us. Like they're just trying to do what they can, and they're getting in all kinds of legal trouble for trying to stop the genocide. Um, so Gaza, speaking of the genocide, Hamas, I saw an infographic where they kind of went over the genocide in northern Gaza, the focused genocide in northern Gaza, specifically 41 days, targeting all shelter centers and schools, destroying all ambulances, fire trucks, and civil defense vehicles, preventing the aid.
Dismantling the shelters, burning them down. They
Did you
allowed the
see?
first aid
Yeah,
into into Beit Lahia the other day, and then they raided the distribution site and rounded up the people at the distribution site. And this is the thing, is that the context of the repression that's happening, in our settler societies is happening at the most brutal moment, which is unbelievable to say 400 days into this, but this is the most brutal moment to circle back into Jabalia and carry out this scorched earth. um, it's a real escalation in the genocide, and whatever pretenses there were in the previous operations, they're not even bothering with those at this point. And it's yeah, it's just it's disgusting. And most of the work that they're doing is with bulldozers, just like going and knocking down the few houses that still stand, the places where people could, climb up to the second floor of the smashed building and sweep it up and make an apartment, out like you've
Hmm.
seen the footage of, making that impossible. Burning the shelters, which are the only places that had even a modicum of resources of any kind. So you're just really watching, to circle back on this is just it's really disgusting. And to time these raids and these attacks on people speaking out against it, at this the worst moment of it.
But you pointed out that something really important, which is that people have not left.
No, they have not left. That is true. The Israelis are not there. You have to read between the lines of what they're saying, because they're talking about the number of people moved, and all of the IDF field reports talk about, how now it's 60,000, now it's 65,000, now it's 80,000. They're trying to make the number to say that the people who are in the north, the 400,000 people that were said to be in the north, are they're making it seem as though they're not there, but they're just moving them around. People are just moving out of the way of the scorched earth, the particular shelter they're burning down, and they're just moving to another place. And there was footage, yeah, just footage of them moving from one shelter to the next and just chanting, death before dishonor as they're marching to the next place. They're not going to the south. They're not passing through this gauntlet of checkpoints that the Israelis have set up to filter people out, and send them to torture camps. People are
I mean,
not leaving the north.
the torture accounts. I mean, I want to get back. I don't want. We're not finished talking about how people have not left the north, but the torture accounts that I've been reading. I mean, torturing a doctor to death.
Yeah.
Like,
And just rounding up people like from 13 years old, just
yeah,
openly rounding up anyone that's over 13 years old, like grade eights. It's
yeah.
it's just it's sick. And you just see how it's being allowed to happen. You see at each stage of this how it's been allowed to happen, and at each stage that it's allowed to happen, Israel just escalates.
Well, we spent some time talking about the pier over the past year and a bit, and there's something peer-like about the way that the Biden people set up this deadline.
Oh
And
yeah.
everybody knew that nothing was going to come of this deadline. But they basically said, you have 30 days. You have 30 days. People are starving, so you have 30 days to do something, or else we're going to have an arms embargo. They actually used those terms. And then the 30 days came, and today they burned and attacked people at aid distribution points.
Well, they
And
used those 30 days. They
yeah,
used 29 of the 30 days to
yeah,
carry out the most brutal
yeah,
starvation siege of this entire war.
yeah,
And they watched the clock tick
yeah.
down to the exact moment. And then they let in a fraction of the number that was put, the metric was put in the letter
Hmm.
from from the Pentagon, from the State Department, put in the letter, and Israel ignored the number,
Yeah.
waited till the last moment, and then did the thing they said was impossible to do previously.
And
It's
then
very
and then
pure
attacked
joke. And then
and then
attacked.
attacked the aid distribution point. And the
Yes.
Americans
Yeah.
explicitly, the guy that we call the Laddu, Patel, he said, well, yeah, we're not going to do anything.
Yeah, so they
So,
attack the aid distribution point because that brings people who weren't at the shelter itself into a spot. So it allows the Israeli military to not
yeah,
actually have to go house to house and fight. It brings people to, to fight. That means to fight civilians.
yeah.
Um, but it brings people to one spot and then they round them up in that spot.
But like the way the Americans announced it and then said there's going to be consequences, and then when the date passed, said actually there isn't going to be consequences, which was the most foreseeable outcome ever. And
Yeah.
yet the whole nature of these deadlines, it's part of the process, right? They just create a date for stupid people to look forward to because we're so stupid that we just have to hope that like this can't go on, and they understand that this can't go on, so this 30 days thing, like they understand that it can't go on, so there's some relief. Like even part of my brain, like even though I know that I knew how it was going to happen, like I still was like, okay, well 30 days, that's some kind of hope, like that something's going to change in 30 days. And you know, the way that they can use these operations and these announcements to put you on a psychological roller coaster like that
Yeah, and
is,
well, it's in a way of owning the news cycle, right? And,
yeah.
and they do that to perfection as well. And then the Americans came out and said that it was a private letter and it was leaked, right? So that was the thing. It didn't
Mhm.
actually have teeth to it. It was just a private letter that wouldn't have normally have been seen, except for there's people in Netanyahu's government that are trying to undermine him. So they released the letter. And just the use of the 30 days to
Mhm.
exact the most brutal form of siege. It's just we're just watching such a demented society that is being completely facilitated by our governments.
Yeah.
Absolutely disgusting. I feel like, people just all this through this, people ask how you're doing, and like these last 30 days have been the worst 30 days. Like this is not something that we're getting used to. This was very obviously, the return to Jabalia was very obviously a significant escalation in the genocide that moved it beyond, this plausible, thing
Mhm.
that you can discuss in international law to
Mhm.
just naked
Yeah.
erasure.
Yeah.
I wish, like, sometimes I wish we could have more articulate ways to describe this other than just to say it's absolutely disgusting what we're watching. And if
I
they're
mean, yeah.
going to crack down on people who say that Israel is an illegitimate state and doesn't have the right to continue on this course, I mean, yeah, it seems like they're going to have their work cut out for them, because I don't know how the world comes back from this. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what the world is anymore.
yeah.
So let's talk about fighting. Um, what I read today was a lot from Lahia, actually. Ambushes, booby-trapped houses, D9s taken out, Merkavas with Thaqibs and Yasin 105. So
Yeah, so what does
a
that tell you?
lot
That tells
going
you
on.
that the Israelis moved into that area,
Yeah,
right? And that you can tell by the field reports
yeah,
where the military is, because that's where the fighting is.
yeah.
And so you're talking about capacity of the resistance. If there was no capacity of the resistance, you wouldn't see the field reports all of a sudden change locations because the fighters don't move around from one location to the other. What you're seeing is the movement of Israeli troops. So they move, they tighten the noose in
Mhm.
Beit Lahia, and all of a sudden you get a dozen qualitative operations using all the weapons that they had in November when the
Mhm.
war started in Beit Lahia.
Mhm.
And none of the casualty we're back to this. The casualties don't match up anymore.
Yeah.
The military censor is so tight. Um, yeah, so yeah, there was a period of time where the casualties started to be understandable. It seemed like
Mhm.
Israel was roughly telling the truth about the casualties, but that is clearly not the case anymore again.
Yeah.
And they're doing this thing that they were doing back in the middle of in the middle of the main part of the war where they they backfill their numbers, right? So
Yeah.
they put people who were killed 2 weeks ago, they slide them in the database the public database, they slide them in underneath. They don't list them at the top. So
Yeah.
they're even covering up the ones they tell the truth about.
Well, I've read long time ago, meaning months ago, someone say, Israel's a small society and you can't hide casualties. And my reaction to that was, of course you can.
Of course you can.
There's millions of people. I wouldn't know if 1,000 people died in a different part of the
No,
GTA.
you can't say nobody died, but
Yeah.
you can't in a society track the funerals that are happening at each spot. Everybody knows somebody who died. You're not saying that nobody died.
Yeah.
But to hide the difference between 1x or 2x, 3x, uh,
Yeah.
that is not hard at
And
all.
and it's always been part of the resistance's MO to tell the Israeli society directly about casualties that Israelis have suffered because they've always lied to it. Israel has always lied to Israelis about the casualties that they were suffering.
Well, remember when they used to exaggerate how horrible it was to be Israeli in the rocket wars? Like it was just
Mm,
the anniversary of the assassination of Ahmed Jabari, and that started the war in 2012 when the rockets first reached Tel Aviv.
mhm,
And that was the era of the trip and fall, where they would say,
mhm.
80 people were taken to
Yes.
hospital, and you'd find, and it was 65 with anxiety and 15 tripped on the stairs going to the shelters. And now you have this situation where you're watching a video, like we saw the one from Jabalia just the other day that there was no casualty report for, where the soldiers outside of his tank and the Shawaz, or it was an
Mhm.
anti-personnel, like in many ways that's even worse, um, just blows up in his face, right?
Yeah.
You could just see it blow up. There's not some kind of editing trick that you're looking at.
Yeah.
We saw the one I reported it on the show, the Cornet strike on the group of soldiers in Kafar Kala, and they didn't report
No,
casualties
no casualties.
but they sent up a smoke screen to withdraw
They're
the people that got hit by
they're
an
healthy.
anti-tank weapon that can penetrate 3 meters of concrete.
Yeah.
And we watched a dozen soldiers walk into that circle.
Yeah.
Ah, just,
So that's
just
Beit
tell us the
Lahia.
truth about how many soldiers are getting killed. Like,
Tell us the truth. Yeah.
just
Yeah,
pretend they're heroes. Like,
Israel should tell the truth. Yeah. That's why won't they just tell the truth?
put more casualties than posted videos dancing in children's clothes or people's wedding dresses. Like, even if you're pretending that you have a war fighting society, have some sense of dignity for the people who are dying for your struggle. And they, they got no sense. They think that if they tell you the truth about how many people are dying, that what? They have a conscription army. What are they going to do?
Well, it's they believe that what they speak into existence is what happens,
Yeah.
right?
And it's
It's that kind of belief. So if they don't talk about it, then it didn't happen. Um, I saw also reports of rocketing the Netzarim corridor with the
yeah,
107
so
MPs.
so all of the other resistance groups are carrying out joint operations where they're just hammering the Netzarim corridor,
Mhm.
which Israeli media reported what we've been reporting for months, that the corridor has been widened,
Mhm.
which is what was happening when there was the, incursion into Tel El Hawa, into Zaytun. That's what they were doing, is widening the corridor. And it's
I mean,
difficult.
the only thing I'd say about widening the corridor is, the usual Basel Araj point, which is like you can widen a corridor on a map, but if you're coming under constant rocket fire in that corridor, you're not destined to have that corridor. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, we've taken the corridor and we've widened it, but like as long as you're there, you have the corridor. And as long as you're there, you're going to be under fire. And there's going to be not just rockets, but like you reported a couple weeks ago, maybe 3, 4 weeks ago, about like a big complicated attack on one of these bases, like
Yeah,
a
by the
multi.
new recruits, right? There was
Yeah.
that new recruits operation. I mean, the,
So
the
they're
widening of the
just,
corridor is
yeah,
essentially creating a buffer zone inside the
right.
buffer
So they're
zone.
destroying buildings.
Yeah, they're destroying. Well,
Okay.
they try to rule out weapons, right? Like they try to make it wide enough that you can't use X, Y, and Z weapon, which is,
Sure.
roughly true. They were getting sniped, and now they're outside of sniper range. But the capacity to um, the military acumen that it takes to take the Netzarim corridor is not impressive. It
Yeah.
was largely an open space.
Yeah.
If the people, the 1,200 homes that were destroyed, and I'm sure now to make it 7 kilometers, we're talking probably 10,000 destroyed. But short of that, that is the easiest thing that a military that's backed by $25 billion from the Americans in 1 year,
Mhm.
they can take that territory.
Yeah.
It's the
Yeah. You're
fact that when they
taking,
go into Beit Lahia,
yeah.
14 months later, they're immediately hammered by qualitative operations that surely have casualties attached to them. That's the resistance. That's the thing that Israel can't do. And even their scorched earth in Jabalia is not going to work. It's not going
Yeah.
to drive people out of Jabalia.
Yeah. And that's why, we're going to talk about this at the end of the video, but that's also why I don't love, like, all of these things people say, I understand why they say them. Like, I understand why people would say they're making Gaza uninhabitable. I know that's the plan. I know that's what they want. But, like, while people inhabit it, they will make it inhabitable. And their plan, the Palestinians' plan, is to make it inhabitable again. And so there's no, like, one of these plans will succeed, I suppose. But like the plan to make it uninhabitable is nothing more than a plan. And the plan to make it habitable again is also a plan. So I don't like talking about future bad outcomes that Israel wants as if they're already facts. And in a
Yes.
sense, it's like what you said about the displacement of people from the north. Like that's what Israel wants, but it
Yeah.
hasn't happened yet. And you shouldn't report about a future that Israel wants as if it's already happened.
Yeah,
That's all.
I feel very strongly about that, especially like in this moment, they're talking about the sort of resettlement of the North,
Yeah.
as if you're gonna move Al-Mag settlement back to Beit Lahia, like
Yeah,
um,
and like that whole thing is weird. I know I like Israel depopulates, Israel bombs, and Israel tries to settle. Like these are all things that these are all just Israel being Israel. But like I kind of want to remind people that in 1948, when Israel settled most of the land that they've stolen, they took over people's houses. They didn't bulldoze everything first. So like
oh no, there
this
was
whole
pots on the
yeah,
stove.
yeah,
They used the same
yeah.
pots in the house. They talked about like the photos on the wall and having to take the photos down and put the new photos up. Like they moved into the same houses.
So this just like returning over and over to destroy everything over and over again, that's not how you resettle a place. That's just like some kind of pathology, like you said, of a demented society, just kind of repeating the same crimes over and over again because they've lost their minds. But like even the talk of resettling Gaza, like given what they've done, like it's just these are just the ravings of lunatics
Yeah.
in a sense. Like
Yeah.
it's not it's yeah. Anyway, maybe it'll happen. Like lots of things might happen, but like it doesn't behoove us to talk about them as if they're facts on the
No,
ground.
and
They're
the
not.
settlement thing is something that dovetails with the fact that in 2005 there was a sector of Israeli society that did not want to leave Gaza
Hmm.
when they evacuated or redeployed to the border of Gaza and uprooted the settlements. There's a significant, you know, minority in Israel that's probably, I don't know if it's a minority anymore, but that wanted to stay. That they
Yeah.
lived on the sea, they lived in
Yeah.
subsidized housing. They, you know, yeah, and so you can find if a newspaper reporter wants to confirm the story that Israel is attempting to resettle the North, you can easily find some nutter to talk about
Yeah. Lots of
reset.
nutters.
Yeah,
Yeah.
lots of them.
But like people have talked about how much money it's going to cost to rebuild Gaza, and therefore Gaza will never be rebuilt or whatever. Again, projections, speculations, not facts. But like that applies for resettling Gaza too. If they, do they expect the Americans to foot the bill for all of this infrastructure that they're going to have to build themselves?
Yeah, and they're going to move into the center of populated areas in Gaza and start bulldozing and building houses under fire. I mean, they
Hmm.
couldn't do that the first time around. But yeah, and this rebuilding thing is not a new problem.
Yeah.
There was no rebuilding after the previous wars either, and Palestinians figured
Yeah.
out how to reuse concrete.
Hmm.
They reused the rebar. They
Hmm.
separated the concrete from the rebar and then straightened out the rebar, which is probably
Yeah.
not ideal for its fidelity of the rebar. But the point is that they, separated all of it out so that they could rebuild with those same supplies. And they did that. And you see, you know, well, now when we're seeing reporting, when we see a cafe got hit in Gaza, a
Hmm.
cafe is a tent that
Hmm.
has a car battery that has a bunch of outlets so that they can boil water to make cups of tea and coffee.
Hmm.
That's
As a
there's
cafe.
cafes, there's an internet cafe, there's
Hmm.
people have their local internet cafe. Palestinians are going to rebuild this area. The question is uh, how that happens. And
Yeah.
um, you know
Okay, West Bank. Now
there's
I read.
enough things to
Oh,
be
sorry.
upset about
Yeah,
than making up
the
things that are
future.
not.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, then the Israeli future, which is, like I said, the ravings of lunatics.
And
Uh,
hasn't been planned. There's no
no.
strategy. There's no strategy that said in January we're going to resettle Gaza. They had
Yeah.
no idea they were going to be allowed to do the corridor and raid strategy when they reinvaded Shifa. They were surprised they were allowed to do that, and many months ago.
Yeah.
And now they can't believe that they're allowed to go back into Jabalia. And not only that, but they're given 30 free days to commit the starvation of the population of Jabalia, where, well, 3 kilometers away, they're doing vaccinations for epidemics that can hit Israelis. So it's just,
Okay.
anyways, we should talk about the resistance.
So, well, yes, we will. The West Bank, Nablus and Jenin, I saw raids. I mean, every day, every single day.
Yeah,
Remind me,
Tulkarm
who's
tell.
the Israelis are in which Israeli divisions are in the West Bank? Because I heard one was moved, right, from the West Bank to Lebanon.
They have territorial divisions in the West Bank, so they
Okay.
can move components of it, but they have basic territorial brigades that are based there, and they're carrying out the vast majority of this, and then they use the border police as the raiding units. So they often go in mixed units that they wouldn't war fight with, but they will because it's effectively like policing operations in the
Yeah.
West Bank. So they have a lot of auxiliary units that will go in, and that's why you'll see very different armored vehicles, right? You see like in a
Mhm.
convoy, you won't see all the same vehicles because they're using border police units, they're using Yamam special forces border police units,
Yeah.
and then they're using the territorial brigades that are based there, and they're just attacking in the same cycle in the same places: Tubas, Tulkarm, Balata, Nablus, Jenin Camp, over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, this is also like some kind of battle of endurance, and they're trying to exhaust the people there. And it's always a question of like, you're exhausting the people, but you're exhausting yourself too, right? So,
Yeah, and then now they're talking this all these Trump guys coming in are gonna facilitate the takeover of the West Bank, and the whole point is that they could have taken the West Bank at any point that they wanted to, but they would become an apartheid state that would
right.
be a criminal state by the Rome Statute and whatever. And so it's like watch what you wish for here. The
Yeah, and I
creation of an
mean, again,
apartheid's
you're redrawing the map, but the prospect of trying to remove all those people to
yeah, you're
presumably,
redrawing the map so you're a minority.
yeah, exactly. If it's a matter of redrawing the map, that's not necessarily to your benefit. If it's a matter of trying to expel the people of the West Bank, that's a tall order.
No.
That's a it's a it's a tall order. And it's asking a lot of Jordan. Jordan will do anything for you, but it's asking a lot. It's asking a lot.
And
So
the West Bank just gets no coverage. It's there's so much to cover that
so much
it's
going on. um okay, well, Yemen. um so Yemen, I've been following this story and I don't think I reported on it, but like the it started a couple days ago when Yahya Sari, the spokesman, announced that after fighting an 8-hour naval battle with the USS Lincoln, that they had foiled a major attack on Yemen. So presumably the USS Lincoln was going to do some kind of big bombing raid with all their, I mean, what does an aircraft carrier do? It does bomb, it launches all their aircraft, and the aircraft launch their air to surface missiles, and they were going to do some big bombing. And um, the Ansar Allah targeted this ship with a whole bunch of stuff. So they described what they did, and the Americans more or less said the same thing. Like they said, they launched a bunch of stuff at us. None of it hit. It had no effect. It was
Yeah.
totally irrelevant. We're leaving anyway. We
Yeah,
were
they
gonna.
scrambled all their jets that were going to bomb Yemen, instead have to shoot down
Yeah.
drones, surface. Uh,
Yeah. And now the ship is leaving for San Diego or something. And purely coincidence because it wasn't hit or anything. It
well,
just
they can't maintain these permanent deployments. So they're handing off the aircraft carriers are handing off to
yeah, after it
squadrons
just
that flew
happens
from
to it
Europe.
just coincidentally happened after the Ansarallah announced an 8-hour naval battle and targeting that carrier. Malik Houthi made a speech on Thursday where he said, no one has ever dared to do this. No one else would dare to do this, to target an American aircraft carrier. And he, like typical Houthi, um, he said if they want to come back, they're welcome. It'll just make it easier to target them if they dare. So,
Well, they're the
um,
last ones. Like there's pretty clear evidence that the German warships were circumnavigating Africa, and so that brought most of the NATO.
yeah,
That NATO just doesn't want the Red Sea, and yeah, Abdel Malik Al Houthi said that the aircraft carrier was also avoiding. They're turning off
yeah,
their transponders
right.
and lurking. He said that they were lurking off the coast, like in African territorial waters, to make them not targets. Um,
So, like gunboat diplomacy,
where
I
you're
guess,
being chased
I
and
guess
you're the
started
one.
in 1750s,
Yeah.
and I guess ended in
Ended in
2024.
yeah, when you're
That's
hiding them along the
yeah,
coast of a
yeah.
of yeah, so
That's the end. That's the
that's
end.
a human shield.
Gunboat diplomacy is over. Gunboat diplomacy, it had a good run. It was about 250 years long, and it's done. It's over. And it's probably anti-shipping ballistic missiles, which nobody had ever apparently done before, which the Houthis did, which ended gunboat diplomacy. Anti-ship ballistic missiles are the technology that ended gunboat diplomacy. There's a quote, John, you'd love this. An American Undersecretary of Defense, he's like a logistics person, and he the quote is the Houthis are getting scary.
Yeah, those are yeah,
The
the
Houthis are
tens
getting
of
scary.
billions of dollars in those fleets. That I mean, it's hard. If you sink an aircraft carrier, I mean, I don't know
Oh
if
my
they can
God.
sink them, but they can definitely harass them enough to make it not worth their. Uh, yeah,
So this is in Axios. Uh, Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment, Bill LaPlante, on Wednesday said the Houthis are getting scary. I'm an engineer and a physicist, and I've been around missiles my whole career. What I've seen of what the Houthis have done in the last 6 months is something that I'm just shocked.
I'm just shocked.
He couldn't even finish his own
And
sentence.
that's the news media. That Axios, that's what a news story is these days.
Yeah,
One quote, they'll tell you what does it mean to you? That's like they make
yeah.
a header. What does this mean to you? And then they tell you what you're supposed to think about three
The Houthis.
the three quotes that are in the
Houthis
story,
getting
and that's the
scary.
news media.
So you know the big Palestine 2 missile that the Ansarallah has. They launched two more of those at Tel Aviv. And it's just like that's just part of life now. Yemen launches gigantic solid fuel ballistic missiles at Tel Aviv every once in a while.
Yeah,
And
and
you're just in Tel Aviv and you're just like, oh well, there's another ballistic missile from Yemen that's just gonna land on some place.
yeah, best case scenario, it gets intercepted and pieces of shrapnel fly all over, or it hits a target. And the Iraqi resistance, I don't know if I'm moving on from
No,
Yemen,
yeah,
but the
you can move on.
Iraqi
That was the last
resistance
thing. Yeah.
has upped their number.
Hmm.
You know, the Israelis are constantly dropping Iraqi drones with fighter jets. There's footage yesterday of in Eilat with three F-35s, F-15s, F-16s in the air trying to find these two $15,000 drones and shooting them down.
Yeah.
And if they get half of them, they brag about, they'll show you the videos of them getting
This
as
is
if
there.
shooting them down isn't part of the point of sending them. It's just,
Yeah.
yeah. So the Iraqi resistance they're
Yeah.
up to like four serious
Launches.
strikes a day
Yeah.
on not just sending them, into the desert, but
Yeah.
where people are in boats with their cameras showing the interceptions or showing the hits.
Or showing the hits. And these hits, it's like nobody ever dies from these hits either.
There's no end to this. These drones are so cheap, so
Yeah.
easy to make. They're all made with parts that are replaceable,
Mhm.
that are sourceable from multiple places. This is an unending. It's the same with Hezbollah. To say that there's been some number of or some percentage of Hezbollah's drones being knocked out. It's not true.
And
They're
it's like, what are you going to do? Invade and occupy Iraq? I believe Iraq is occupied right now. So occupying Iraq is not exactly going
Yeah,
to
well, they're
solve this
bombing
one for you.
Syria. They've escalated their bombing of Syria significantly.
Yeah.
But just whatever day in the world that we thought that there was an American red line or whatever, this just it shows if there was rational people making these decisions, they would not tell you to open up additional fronts in
Yeah.
your war.
There's definitely some other thing at work besides cold strategic rationality. So I'm ready to go to Lebanon.
Okay, let's do it.
So Lebanon, I mean, Israel's killed 3,445 Lebanese people.
Yeah.
They had 116 airstrikes in the past 24 hours.
Yeah.
So
They killed 16 paramedics. They attacked 6 civil defense paramedic stations.
yeah.
They're just doing the exact same thing.
Yeah, the only differences are one,
So,
they can't besiege it.
no.
They can bomb Syria. Okay, you can bomb Syria. You can bomb roads, but that doesn't stop resupply. It makes resupply expensive and inconvenient, but that's how they've been operating all along. They've never depended on 100%. They've never depended on not getting bombed to get their stuff. Uh, so that's the one main difference in terms of the depravity of their approach or their general idea of trying to just depopulate people to without much regard for where they're supposed to go or whatever. Like they're not trying to this is the thing. Like this the previous in previous decades Israel tries to occupy a place including the pop and control the population. And what they're doing in Gaza and what they're doing in Lebanon is they're just trying to expel them. So it's like a we destroy everything and we expel the people.
Yeah, they're just destroying. In Lebanon, there does appear to be, a level of there still are rules. There's a level of deterrence that Israel is not doing some of the things that it did in the 2006 war, like targeting
Well,
roads,
yeah.
bridges, electrical, because Hezbollah has the capacity to rain these missiles down in the same way the Houthis do. They have it, a
Hmm.
1,000 times
From
the
closer,
ability
yeah.
from closer with more, and they're not. Hezbollah is not doing that. They're not raining them down on Tel Aviv, but they do. They have made in the last few days some pretty significant um,
Yeah.
changes in targeting. They targeted the main defense campus in Tel Aviv.
Yeah. I mean, I remember reading some angry minister some angry minister saying, we need to get together in the Kirya and we need to figure out a plan and we need to hit these bastards hard or whatever. It was something like that, and it started with we need to get together in the Kirya. And I remember thinking when he said that, like, are you sure?
Yeah, that's that, but
Are
they don't
you
have a
sure?
backup for that. They don't have a backup for that. All they have
Yeah,
is bunkers in that complex.
yeah.
It's like a complex of towers that has the entire nerve center for the Israeli military and
So
Israeli
like,
military intelligence. And
so there's
Hezbollah
this.
showed us that they
Yeah,
know what office floor
yeah.
each particular minister and agency is in that building. If they decide that that is going to be a permanent target and they're going to hit it every single day, which again, Hezbollah is not doing that. They're still just almost unbelievable strategic patience.
This kind of computer model that Hezbollah showed, this kind of animated computer model of all the buildings and everything, like this is extremely difficult and extremely expensive to produce. Like you don't this is yeah. This is not like you can't just download this off the web or whatever. Like this is not so what they have in terms of intelligence. And it's also like there's a real return to trolling after, like the page, like his, like Nasrallah used to always have this smirk and he would always say like we have surprises for you and stuff, and we'll see you on the battlefield and wait for us and whatever. And it's like after the pager attack and like after all those assassinations, it's like the Israelis were like, well, who's laughing now kind of thing. And it's like there was this shaky period, and now Hezbollah's right back to that attitude, right?
And
They
this attack would have been a Nasrallah speech that would
yeah.
have just been, it would have made everything make sense. The psyops, I did a bit of them on the show on Wednesday. The psyops that have been coming out are very solid and very um,
This is
well
this says
aimed.
this is like another troll, right? They're just like um news of a news of a difficult incident in Lebanon.
Yeah,
They made Hezbollah made this. They're just like had this
yeah.
very difficult incident in Lebanon, Free Lebanon. So they're making these kinds of things. Now, just to show you like where I want to talk about the missiles and the specific missiles they're using too, but I wanted to show yesterday because they also produced these maps, and this is yesterday. They also made one for today, but like if this yellow line that I'm tracing is the so-called border between Israel and Lebanon, you see that a lot of these actions, a lot of these targets are south of the border. They're still hitting not just within Israel like Haifa and so on, but also all along the border.
Yeah, more
And
than 2/3 of the operations.
more than two-thirds of the operations. And I'll just show you today. I believe this is today.
Which is also something that's hard to, they haven't been doing this. So now they're hitting these forward positions. Now they're hitting these divisions that are stacked up on the border that
Yeah,
they haven't previously been doing. And that's again something that Nasrallah would have said in a speech.
yeah. So there was one particular, I think it's this one that I'm pointing to right now. The town is called, I think, Talusa. And I just made a note because Talusa, so today there were reports, just the field reports were rocket attacks of, so the Israelis are several kilometers in from that, at that town, and they're
Yeah.
inside that town. And so the rocket attacks of against Israeli gathering of forces in Talusa at 2:15 p.m., 2:30 p.m., 3 p.m., 3:45 p.m., 6 p.m., 6 p.m., and 8 p.m.
Yeah.
And so that's the intensity of fire that they're facing. And then that was Talusa, and then there's Marun al Ras. They're using the Nasser 1 missile, and with the Kirya, they were using the Qadr 2. And there was also an attack on with the Fateh 110, which is a 500 kilo payload. I think you mentioned that in the live stream.
Yeah,
But
we've been waiting for that one.
the Nasser 1 missile, there's a journalist, Khalil Nasrallah, who reported, he said, it's very noteworthy that Hezbollah has introduced the Nasser 1 missiles into ground battles in southern Lebanon after previously using them to strike critical military targets deep within the entity. Using these precision missiles into ground combat is one of the surprises of this war. The use of these missiles has a very significant impact. Yeah,
This
reminiscent.
is the precision guided system. So they're taking these previously unguided rockets that are
Mhm.
heavy payload rockets. And Nasrallah's been talking about this for, almost a decade now, about this precision guided project and essentially turning all of these artillery rockets into precision guided missiles.
Maneuvering.
And then you're not just firing
Mhm.
in an area, but
Yeah.
you're actually hitting over and over again the same spot with precision. And this is the thing, is that Hezbollah is not trying to start a war. But if they were to decide one day that pattern of attack that you just described, if they wanted to do that all across the border at all of these muster positions for 5 divisions stacked up on the border, they could do that. But at this
Well,
point,
yeah.
it still seems like Hezbollah believes that Israel's not really into this. Hezbollah's not going to draw Israel into doing something.
Yeah, I don't
Um,
think it's about pretext or drawing Israel. I think it's more like the fact that this could go on for a really long time.
yeah.
And so you don't want to use things that you may need later.
Yeah, and it just tells you another time that Israel's wrong about their intelligence, because they've been saying for 15 years that Hezbollah, in the first day of the war, Hezbollah would fire 5,000 rockets on
Hmm.
Israel, right? And it's
But
like
it
that's
is it
actually
is
not
uh
what.
it is that like that boiling frog thing because it's like it is more per day than than each day it's like a little bit more than the previous day or like at
Yeah,
least
and
each month.
you can't sustain your forces in that position if you're hit with precision guided 100-kilo warhead. Um,
Yeah, and they
can't
and
sustain
Israel
that.
says nothing about it, right? Like the Israel's just like nothing happened, nothing
No,
happened.
the military censor is
Yeah,
completely,
absolute.
it's absolute.
So they're getting hit by 100-kilo payload precision guided missiles in gatherings, and there's no casualties. They're suffering no casualties.
And the north is empty, so no one's there to see. Which in Gaza, you had people closer because you had troops.
Hmm.
They flew to the hospital that was there. There was more ways to see the casualties. But yeah, the military censor is complete. They released the other day. Halevi speaks and says they're going to expand the operation, from four
Hmm.
kilometers. They go the 2 additional kilometers to 6 kilometers, the most that they've been. And they're immediately reporting serious, serious incidents, security incidents,
Difficult incidents.
difficult incidents where the Golani unit is Halevi is speaking at noon saying we're going to expand the operation, and within 2 hours, Golani troops are getting killed in face-to-face fights by the Israeli telling of the story, by less Hezbollah fighters than were killed. And so
Israel today Israel today comments on the ambush on the southern Lebanese border yesterday, which resulted in 6 killed and 1 wounded from the Golani Brigade. Once again, a punch to the gut. First, news of an event in southern Lebanon. Then you learn there are casualties. Then you find out the number. And finally, you discover it's the Golani Brigade. The land of Lebanon has become saturated with the blood of generations of Golani fighters. This journey of bereavement, winding through homes, families, and settlements, brings up quite a few thoughts, with the first obvious one being, for how much longer will this go on? There's a gap between victory declarations and reality on the ground, highlighted by recent events.
Yeah, it's like this. It's like they have to say it in a poem. They, they can't just tell the truth. And
Yeah,
that's the first hours of
yeah,
this expanded operation. And that just gives you again indications that these are the things that we will see. If this is a full scale, if Israel has the intention of moving into Lebanon, they're going to do it in tanks. They're going to have to do it with Golani troops going into the houses that they're getting killed in.
yeah.
And they're going to have to do it in large numbers. And
And those
that's not
tanks
what
are
we're
gonna
seeing. And
and
those
those
tanks are
tanks are
going to
gonna
get
be
destroyed.
killed in large numbers. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, someone said like it seems like they tried a big infiltration today, and I was like, when they try a big
you'll
infiltration, which
see.
I still think they will, but the characteristic of that day will be lots of tanks
Difficult
getting killed.
security incidents.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
And we'll see
specifically,
them. We'll
yeah,
see them on camera. We'll see them.
specifically lots of tanks, like at least double digits of tanks will be
Yes.
lost on that one day.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
And they'll be hit with weapons that literally
yeah,
have cameras on the
yes,
nose of them.
yeah, we've
We will
seen those.
see these. We will see the fighter videos. We
Yeah,
will be seeing this. Israel is trying to tell its people it's doing something that
yeah.
the evidence doesn't right now
Well,
support
yeah,
that they're doing it.
they can show the village. They can show the entire village exploding when they go in and set mines, but they're trying to go in and set the mines and blow up the village before Hezbollah gets to them.
And they're not telling us what village it is. They're completely their
Hmm.
military censor does not tell you
Where
where
they
the fighters are at all. They
they don't
only
want.
tell you the best they'll do is tell you what division, and you can know. I've got a trusty map over here with all the division markings on them. But
Yeah.
that's the only way. They're
But
not.
there's the other thing that happened today was because they went a little deeper today, I guess, towards the Talusa and Hiyam, the Hezbollah showed up behind them. So they one of their units found themselves completely encircled.
Yeah.
And so,
And
when
then
you
they have to
over
send rescue units.
yeah,
And
which
then the
also get hit,
war. Yeah, and then the war, but that's what happens. And then the war becomes the rescue units rescuing the rescue units in an endless cycle.
which
And
happened
that's
in the West in Nakura
and that
a
was the
couple weeks ago.
2006 war as well.
Yeah.
And the nature of the landscape in that area is that if you are taking villages, they will come up behind you, and
Yeah.
you are not taking villages. And no matter what the media says or what you're hearing or what's being implied by the
Hmm.
number of troops on the border, they're not in villages because when they are in villages, they're having difficult security
Difficult
incidents.
situations. So, John, I had to address this thing where people are saying it's not a war, it's a genocide. And like, I just, like, I talk about the war, and people, even in the comments here, have said to stop calling it a war. And it's like, I don't, I don't put war as distinct from genocide. I don't, I don't think of those things as opposites. And so I just I just wanted to kind of talk to you about that.
Yeah, I hear that a lot too because I obviously call it a war. I feel like it's in my corner of the world, it's disrespectful and uh, it's erasing the Palestinian resistance and the Palestinian, um, you know, place in this story. Um,
So Finkelstein, I made you watch this. Finkelstein debated Elijah Magnier, and specifically to your point, he said the the resistance part of this is so irrelevant. It's so trivial. I think he had some other adjectives too. That it's marginal, it's trivial, and it's basically playing into Israeli propaganda to talk about it
Not
as a war.
basically. He said it was facilitating the genocide. He
Facilitating the
told
genocide.
Elijah to his face that
Yeah.
it was facilitating the genocide. He couched it all in the, I have a lot of respect for you, and you
Hmm.
obviously have a lot of experience. And he listed all of these criteria that Norm lacks. Uh,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
then says you're facilitating the genocide by reporting on the resistance. That I don't even, I mean, we talked a little bit about this offline, and my response was like, I shouldn't even give it oxygen, because it's like that. I found that to be just such a
Well,
Finkelstein. Just
like who's playing into Israeli propaganda? Because
yeah,
the idea that Israel is invincible and that people fighting it are idiots is
or
that,
that they're not fighting it,
or that they're
right?
not fighting it, or that they can't. They're not fighting it because they can't. Because there's
He was
no,
saying that he talked to somebody in Gaza who told them that there was only 10 or 15,000 Hamas at the most.
at the most.
You're just like,
At the
buddy.
most. And
Like,
the tunnels are exaggerated, and Sinwar exaggerates, and
yeah,
everybody is exaggerating.
yeah. With
And
no evidence provided for
but
any of
it's,
these claims.
well, yeah. So basically, he says the reason the estimates of fighters are coming from Israel because Israel wants to say they're mostly killing fighters. So that's where he kind of goes with it. But then I think it's playing into Israeli propaganda to say that Israel is some kind of god that can impose whatever they want on the situation, and that Palestinians are totally helpless in the face of this,
Yeah.
what, master race?
Yeah,
I don't
and
know.
that they're not actually involved in a liberation struggle that this chapter of began, on
That it's
October
not, and it's
7th.
not strategy, right? They're not allowed to have strategy. Like they're just reacting, or like hopeless. They just, armed people are just hopeless. October 7th was like an act of hopeless people.
Yeah.
Um,
And if there was no resistance, then the implication is that the war would end and Israel would become like a binational democratic state. And it's
yeah,
just,
I mean, yeah, like the one thing, the other, that's the other problem with what Finkelstein is doing there, because Finkelstein's basically like, the resistance is trivial, it's a genocide. And then, so then it's like, we agree that it's a genocide. We agree that it's a
yeah,
genocide.
yeah.
We don't agree that the resistance is trivial.
Oh,
And we don't agree. And I think counseling despair is far more playing into Israeli propaganda and facilitating genocide than reporting, which is all we're doing on what the resistance is doing. Like, we emphasize what the resistance is doing, but we're
because
not
we're
making
reporting
things
on a
up.
war.
Yeah, because we're reporting on a war. Yeah. So like, but then, the question for people who are of that persuasion, and it's like, I'm not going to try to talk to Finkelstein. Like, Finkelstein's not somebody you talk to. Like, he's not somebody who listens. He's not somebody who, he's a very contemptuous person who doesn't listen. But like, somebody who is considering his argument, how do you think this is going to end? Like, he is truly counseling despair. And the only sense of a theory that you get from him about how he thinks this might end is, he says, it follows the news cycle, and when it's prominent in the news, uh Israel kills fewer people, and when it's less prominent in the news, Israel kills more people. And at another point, he says there's this thing called international law that stops them from from going to extermination. And I don't believe that that is true. And I believe that the events of this past year have demonstrated that there is not this thing called international law and that it is not restraining Israel whatsoever. And in fact, Israel has absolutely made a mockery of this thing called international law.
And there's never been a more clear data set of that than
Yeah.
in the weeks and months between the times that he speaks. So
You had
it's
an ICJ ruling, you had an ICC warrant, you had, well, a warrant that never actually came through, but the announcement of warrants, that the prosecutor would seek warrants. You had a Security Council resolution for a ceasefire that was not vetoed by the US. And all of it was ignored. What 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 is this thing called international law that's restraining Israel? How? And
yeah.
then the resistance is trivial because he says it amounts to one casualty per day. But like, and then it's a lot of talking about the future. Gaza's never going to be rebuilt because Israel's not going to let concrete in. And it's like the whole point of this war is that Israel doesn't get to determine what goes in and out of Gaza anymore.
And
That's
they
what they're
spent
fighting for.
they've spent the last 15 years preventing concrete from getting into Gaza. So yeah, that people shouldn't be able to fight back. And I don't know, it's I don't know what Finkelstein's on about and
It's
what.
not just him. It's like again, I think I don't I would I don't believe Finkelstein lies. I've followed Finkelstein very closely for many years. I
Yeah, our
read
whole
everything he
lives.
writes. I
Yeah,
watch everything he does.
our entire
I don't
life.
believe he lies. I don't believe he has bad intentions. I do believe he does his homework about what he does his homework about, and he doesn't, he's very dismissive about what he thinks is not important.
Yeah.
But I think what all of which is to say, I think what he's saying is coming from a good place. To he doesn't want to join Israel in exaggerating how bad or dangerous the Palestinian resistance is. But the flip side of that coin is like you don't restrain Israel by dismissing resistance, and you don't um, strengthen Israel by reporting on what the resistance has been able to do. So,
No. And no and Elijah is not exaggerating the resistance or not
no,
telling stories um, that are not
yeah,
backed up by evidence. And it's just a strange position for Finkelstein because he's supposed to be this forensic scholar.
yeah,
And we
facts,
have this battle where the people themselves who are involved in the battle are disseminating the
yes,
information. And that is the job and that is being done is to take the footage and the lived reality of these fighters
yeah,
and demonstrate what is happening. It's
yeah,
the most direct line to a resistance movement, to a liberation movement that
in
that
history,
in world history.
yeah, and the person who's like interested in facts isn't paying attention to these facts.
Yeah,
And like
they're
I noticed something else. He's into October 7th now. And like after October 7th, he was out there saying there were atrocities and he was like even if there were atrocities and I know there were atrocities, then, you know, people have been so dehumanized that they like he was doing that kind of
Oh
thing.
yeah, I noticed that too. And he's done some research on October 7th.
He's finally done some research and he's figured out that there were no rapes on
Yeah,
October 7th.
yeah,
And now he's like going over that and I'm just like you
yeah.
know,
Like 13
welcome.
and a half months
Yeah,
later.
welcome. Ahlan wa sahlan.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, this is it's just you end up in this position where he's accusing us or people like us of facilitating Israel, but we could level just as easily that accusation on him. And so this is like not a great it's not a great debate to be
No,
doing.
I did not feel I did not feel attacked by that at all. I just
Yeah.
the fact that we're getting the videos, the reporting from the
Yeah.
resistance, and and the journalism that I've done around those videos is to spend all of my all
Yeah.
pretty much all of the hours in the day um essentially vetting and
Yeah.
verifying the
Right.
videos. Like that is my entire life, is not just saying that something is because we want it to be, but
Yeah.
cross-referencing it in every possible way to understand
Yeah.
this first person view. And when I say first person view, I mean literally the camera is on the forehead of the fighter who's
But we're
executing the operation.
and like we're not we would be reporting on this whether the resistance was winning or losing, and we do report on it in bad days and
Oh
good
yeah.
days,
Oh yeah.
right?
No,
It's
yeah.
not like contingent on them winning. We're not.
No, no, in fact, I haven't done
Yeah.
anything else with my life but
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
And a long time ago, I did this work in the Second Intifada, and didn't lecture on this material because this material was there wasn't the audience in the same way
Yeah.
for the resistance.
Yeah.
um for that, but that's what I was doing in the Second Intifada. And when I stopped working in Palestine and started working in North America, I covered armed armed struggle Sunni jihadists in Iraq and Syria and Nigeria. And so
Hmm.
it's not like we woke up on
Yeah.
October 7th and started to become
Yeah.
understand the resistance. I mean, yeah, this is this you have a much more diverse you're a
Yeah.
much
Yeah.
more diverse thinker than me. This is all I do. And so I didn't feel in any way attacked. I mean, people don't like that I say IDF. Like they people say
Oh,
that,
right.
like that kind of stuff. Like I don't think those are the battles that
Yeah.
we should be fighting. It's the name of
Yeah.
a
I
war
I
is
don't
when
I don't
two
always.
sides fight
Yeah.
each other, and you call the group by the
What they
name
call it.
that they
Yeah.
call themselves. You
Right.
don't make up names so that you have a secret language that shows certain people that while leaving the rest of the people who are just part of, so
Right. Well,
they're
yeah.
I
I
don't
mean, these
say
are
the
all.
defense forces. I don't say that they're it's their name, IDF. I'm not changing that to occupation force. We use defense in every other
Well, yeah, you could call
circumstance.
it the yeah, whatever. I sometimes try to I don't want to say pander. I sometimes try to meet that view halfway by calling it the Israeli army or something, or
Yeah,
the
the
Israeli
Israeli
military.
military.
Yeah.
That's EI style guide, and I
Yeah.
don't I accept that. I think,
Yeah.
but the IDF is an acronym, and
Right.
that's the word that they use in Hebrew. They don't call it the defense or
Well, I
liberation
mean,
for. They don't call it the
yeah.
heroic forces. It's an acronym,
The
and it's just not the
anti-normalization, argument is like use all the old names, don't use, don't call it
it's
Israel.
just not the battle that
Israel.
we should be fighting. It's their defense, the battle for calling the Ministry of War the Ministry of Defense was 3 generations ago. and it was a battle that, we don't go
Well,
around. We call it the defense ministry in Israel. We call it the Department of Defense in Canada. It's called the Department.
well,
Uh,
maybe Trump will maybe Trump will adjust some of those names. He seems to like to name things more directly and
yeah,
progressively.
I just think it's just not these
But
these
but
yeah.
the last thing on this matter is like again, just to reiterate, they're not opposed. They're not opposed views. And war doesn't necessarily there are actually fewer symmetrical wars than there are asymmetric wars.
Yeah.
Most wars are actually characterized by disparity between one
Yes.
side and the other.
Yes.
And, this is one of the bigger disparities. But in fact, in this history between the Zionists and the Palestinians and the different peoples of the region that the Zionist project has targeted, the disparity has been bigger in the past than it is now. And if
Absolutely.
anything, it's trending towards equality, not towards
It's trending
greater
towards
disparity.
Israel's army being a defense force and
Yeah,
not an occupation force.
yeah,
But it's under attack. Its country is shrinking.
yeah.
It's not occupying foreign lands. It's actually trying to recoup territory that it lost in
Yeah, I mean, even the West Bank raids, it's like you're
it's a
raiding an area that you took in 1967. So this is not like
yeah, it's a
you're
proper name. It's just a proper name. You don't there's no need to change. As a journalist, there's no need to change. I never tell
you're
anyone
still
else
back on
that they
that.
should.
You're back on the idea thing. I'm trying to move along, John.
No, well, you
Uh
sent me that thing about genocide where was
yeah,
describing.
yeah,
You sent some social media post
exactly.
about
Yeah.
that it was not a war,
If
it was a genocide, and I agreed with everything that the
yeah,
post said. So it's
right,
like
right.
they're not oppositional. It's not. They're not oppositional. And I yeah.
But like, yeah. Yeah. I don't want to talk too much about Finkelstein because like I said, it's not a pure dislike that I have for Finkelstein by any stretch, you know. There's a lot of things that he does that I like, including since October 7th. But like he keeps saying he's not a military thinker and he's not a military strategist and he doesn't think that way. And then he goes and says things about these things that he has just told you he doesn't know about.
Yeah.
Uh,
If you were a a serious journalist covering this
yeah,
genocide and you
right,
don't cover the videos that the resistance produces,
right.
you're just that's when you're a
That's neglect. Yeah,
propagandist and neglect and you're yeah, this is a central component of what we're experiencing right
yeah,
from the first minutes that they crossed the border on the morning of October 7th. The video evidence on both sides, the evidence that the Israelis have produced and the evidence that the Palestinians have produced, is a central pillar to what we're seeing right now. The fact that we could be somehow in a small handful of people that are regularly reporting on it is an indictment of the media. It's not a statement about us. I mean, that this is a central component of what this battle is. These are not oppositional points, and that's the point.
yes, that's the point.
I, I
Um,
I I mean I'll be honest. I didn't like using the word genocide in October.
mm,
I was a slow adopter of that term. And in the 20 years of covering the conflict before that, um, you know, yeah, I mean, I published an interview with Tanya Reinhardt called "The Slow and Steady Genocide" that was
yeah,
published in, but I was hesitant. I'm hesitant to use words like that.
Right.
I believe that there's no need to exaggerate the Israel-Palestine conflict, and I've felt that since I was young and got involved in this, that you just only need to tell the truth. You don't need to exaggerate
Like the truth is
using
bad
words.
enough kind of
The
thing.
truth is bad enough, and so adopting the word genocide and looking back on it now, it's like, yeah, I was slow to
No,
use
I
that
mean,
term.
I was talking about it in '05. So
Yeah.
for me, it was like very clear and very scary.
Yeah, there's
Um,
no question, and yeah, yeah. I know that it's happening,
yeah.
but I wouldn't use it because I'm careful about like that. That's how I see it. So
Yeah.
it's not like it's the opposite of using these words thoughtlessly.
No,
It's
yeah, no. But again, if you don't think it applies here, you don't know what it means.
exactly.
And like, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways.
And if you don't see this as the natural outcome of the state of Israel, then I think you
Yeah.
misunderstand the state.
Yeah.
And the scale and the fact, the way that this has happened is shocking. But the fundamental understanding of Israel as a genocidal project from its inception is pretty fundamental to understanding the conflict. It's never been anything but that,
Yeah.
right? This is
Yeah,
just
but like an open-ended war on civilians is a genocide, but
yeah.
it's, you know. All right. Well,
You needed to get that off your chest.
yeah.
I
And
did
I
not.
so,
I did not feel Finkelstein's barbs.
you did not feel the barbs. I just there's something about the counseling of despair and also, you know, the kind of the idea that like the idea that international law is going to ride in and save us, and that's the realist position. That
Just
starts
you saying that made me just
yeah,
that made me yeah, feel
that starts to
disgusting.
get offensive. And also like then you get into like yeah, then you get into like I don't know, shitting on the people that are actually fighting and dying.
Yeah, and when it comes down to it, what is this about if not that? If it's about their liberation struggle. That's what
Yeah.
that's what we're watching, and the way that it's going to end is not um, by Israel coming to
Coming
its
to their
senses,
senses. Yeah.
yeah, and making a liberal, you know, socialist democracy or whatever.
Yeah. So that's gonna be a while from now. And until then,
No
hang
end
in
in
there.
sight.
Yeah. I was gonna say hang in there.
Yeah, hang in
And
there.
we'll see you in the next one. So yeah, regular live stream Wednesday.
Yeah, regular live stream Wednesday.
Okay, guys.
See
Hang
you
in
guys.
there. We'll see you in the next one.